"Suck the venom out, please, it's swelling," she cried. The rancher did, then went cold with shock. Birds chirped softly in the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the tall grasses that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional lowing of cows and the distant neigh of a horse. It was the kind of morning that made life feel peaceful, almost perfect. But as anyone who lived close to nature knew, calm mornings often hid unexpected dangers. The rancher, a man in his 40s, stood near the barn, checking the fences and making sure the water troughs were full. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but his eyes held a sharp intelligence and a careful attention to detail. He moved with the confidence of someone who had spent decades working the land, someone who knew the ranch like the back of his hand. He was dressed in a worn shirt and sturdy jeans, boots thick with dust, and his hands, strong and rough, handled the chores with practiced ease. Nearby, his niece, a lively girl of 17, ran through the grass, gathering wildflowers for a small bouquet. She had inherited her uncle's love for the outdoors, though she approached it with a youthful energy and curiosity. Her dark hair bounced as she ran, and her laughter rang out over the fields, filling the ranch with a sense of life and joy. The niece and her uncle shared a close bond. She had spent many summers at the ranch, learning to ride, to care for animals, and to respect the land. He, in turn, had grown protective of her, teaching her the ways of the ranch while also keeping a careful eye on the hidden dangers that often went unnoticed in the wild. As the two of them moved toward the edge of the pasture, the girl paused to admire a butterfly dancing above a patch of wildflowers. The rancher called out gently to her, reminding her to be careful. "Watch your step," he said, his voice steady but tinged with affection. "The grass may hide more than flowers." She nodded, smiling, and continued, slightly distracted by the delicate wings of the butterfly. No one noticed the snake until it was too late. Hidden among the tall grass, coiled and almost invisible, it had been waiting patiently for any unsuspecting movement. The rancher had seen snakes before, many times, and knew their silent danger, but today, the snake's presence had gone unnoticed. The girl stepped too close to the coiled creature, and in an instant it struck. A sharp, burning pain shot through her ankle and she screamed. The rancher spun around, eyes widening in alarm. He had seen the aftermath of snake bites in the past, but hearing the scream of someone he cared for, someone under his protection, sent a rush of adrenaline through him. He dashed forward, heart pounding, and grabbed her hand to steady her. It's okay," he said, though his own mind raced. His training, his experience told him that time would be critical, that every second mattered. He knelt beside her, examining the bite as she cried out, the pain and shock clear in her eyes. The swelling started almost immediately. Within moments, the skin around her ankle began to puff up, red and angry. The rancher knew enough to recognize the danger, the telltale signs that venom had entered her system. Panic threatened to take hold, but he fought to stay calm, knowing that fear would only make things worse. He had to think, act quickly, and protect her until help could arrive. I think it's swelling fast," she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Her voice trembled with fear. "Please do something." He clenched his jaw, his hands hovering uncertainly over the bite. He had a first aid kit in the truck, and he knew the hospital was miles away, down bumpy, uneven roads. He considered every option, every method he had learned over the years. Survival manuals, advice from old ranch hands, stories he had heard around campfires, all of it swirled in his mind. And then she said the words that made him pause. "Suck the venom out, please," she gasped, panic making her voice sharp and desperate. "It's swelling, I don't want it to." He froze for a heartbeat, understanding the old survival remedy she mentioned. He had read about it, and he knew it was controversial, risky even. Some venom could be absorbed through the mouth, making the situation worse. But as he looked at her wide, terrified eyes at the rapid swelling spreading up her leg, the decision was made in an instant. He couldn't let her panic. He couldn't wait for help that might take too long. Taking a deep breath, he nodded, trying to reassure her despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "All right," he said, his voice calm but his heart thundering. "I'm going to help. You just hold still, okay?" The girl nodded weakly, trembling as she leaned back slightly, her trust in him absolute. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare instance where both of them were acutely aware of the danger. He tried to steady her, gripping her ankle gently but firmly. He kept talking to her, telling her to focus on his voice, on the warmth of his presence, on anything but the fear clawing at her chest. As he began the process, the rancher felt a strange mixture of adrenaline, fear, and determination. His hands were careful, precise, though a slight tremor betrayed his anxiety. The sun beat down on them, hot on their backs, but neither noticed the warmth. All that mattered was her safety. All that mattered was that she survived the first crucial moments after the bite. The grass around them swayed in the wind, indifferent to the crisis unfolding within it. A lone bird took flight, circling above the ranch, its shadow crossing over the two figures locked in a struggle against time. For the rancher, every second felt like an eternity. He checked her pulse, whispered encouragements, and kept a sharp eye on the spreading redness. He had never felt this close to danger in all his years on the ranch, not for himself, but for someone he loved. Despite the fear, a strange calm settled over him. Experience had taught him to focus, to act decisively. He knew the risks, he knew the limits of what he could do, but he also knew that hesitation could cost her life. His thoughts moved quickly, considering what steps to take next, how to stabilize her until professional help arrived. He could feel her shaking beneath his hands, her breath uneven, and it strengthened his resolve. For her part, the girl fought panic with every ounce of strength she had. She clung to his words, to his presence, and to the trust she had always placed in him. Her fear was real, but so was her faith in the man beside her. The fear of the bite, the swelling, and the unknown venom coursed through her, yet she focused on something tangible: his steady hands, his calm voice, the way he wouldn't let go. The rancher worked with care, trying to minimize the spread of venom while keeping the girl conscious and talking. He encouraged her, reminded her of small things they had shared in the past, riding lessons, stories about the ranch, the first time she had learned to milk a cow. Each memory, each word was a lifeline, a distraction from the pain and fear. Minutes stretched endlessly, each one critical. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the field. He had learned over years of ranch life that nature could be unforgiving, that a small mistake or a moment of carelessness could escalate into disaster. And now, here they were, caught in a moment where experience, instinct, and love collided. In those moments, the rancher realized something profound. Life on the ranch was never truly about control. It was about respect, awareness, and action in the face of danger. He had taught his niece to be cautious, to respect the land and its hidden threats. And now, as he faced this unexpected challenge, he understood that lessons were never truly learned until they were tested. Despite the pain and fear, the bond between them deepened. The niece's trust in him, her reliance on his knowledge and care, became a shared strength. And for him, the love and responsibility he felt surged through every nerve, guiding his actions, steadying his hands, and focusing his mind. By the time he finished the first critical steps, the girl's breathing had steadied slightly, and the initial panic had eased. The swelling, though still concerning, was under observation. The rancher stood up, brushing dust from his jeans, and looked around the field, aware that the danger had not fully passed. But he also felt a cautious hope, a belief that with continued care, quick thinking, and perhaps a bit of luck, she could survive this terrifying ordeal. The morning that had begun with such calm and promise had transformed into a test of courage, trust, and human instinct. And as they prepared to move toward the truck and the distant hope of medical help, both of them understood that life on the ranch, with all its beauty and freedom, always demanded respect for the unpredictable forces of nature. And in that quiet, tense moment, surrounded by golden grasses and the distant sounds of the ranch, the story of their courage, fear, and unbreakable bond had only just begun. The rancher's hands were still trembling slightly as he helped his niece stand, supporting her weight. Carefully, every step was measured, cautious, as the swelling in her ankle made it hard for her to walk. Her breathing was uneven, and beads of sweat dotted her forehead. The pain was sharp, but the fear of what could happen next weighed heavier on both of them. They were far from any immediate help, the hospital a long, twisting drive over rough roads, and each passing minute seemed longer than the last. "Don't worry," the rancher said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had faced dangerous situations before, storms, injured animals, and harsh winters, but nothing had ever made his chest feel this tight with fear for another person's life. The niece leaned heavily on him, her trust absolute, and that trust made his own fear even sharper. He couldn't fail her, not now, not ever. The girl's eyes were wide with panic. "It's swelling so fast," she whispered, her voice shaking. I feel it going up my leg." She shivered, and the rancher could see the fear in her expression. It was one thing to deal with an injured animal or a minor scrape, but this was serious. He had to act carefully, make the right choices, and move quickly. He remembered the survival tips he had read years ago, the stories from other ranchers, and the advice of doctors he had met at local clinics. He knew that moving her too quickly could make things worse. He also knew that waiting passively for help was not an option. With a deep breath, he decided that the only way to keep her safe was to get her to the truck and then drive straight to the nearest hospital. He would monitor her vitals, keep her calm, and do everything in his power to slow the venom spread. Supporting her carefully, he guided her toward the truck parked at the edge of the pasture. The niece stumbled slightly, and he caught her before she fell. She clutched his arm, her knuckles white with fear and pain. He reassured her with gentle words, talking about the little things, how soon they would get there, how brave she was being, and even small memories like the last time they had rode horses together. Each word was meant to keep her focused, to distract her from the rising panic, and to remind her that she was not alone. As they neared the truck, the rancher noticed how isolated the area really was. The nearest neighbors were miles away, and cell service was spotty at best. In emergencies like this, the isolation that made the ranch beautiful also made it dangerous. He pulled out his phone, praying for a signal, and finally got a weak connection. With trembling hands, he called emergency services, giving his exact location and describing the situation as calmly and clearly as he could. While waiting for confirmation, the girl's cries grew softer, her strength fading as the venom continued its work. The rancher's mind raced through every possible outcome. He had prepared for many emergencies over the years, but this felt different. He realized how fragile life could be, how quickly a happy, ordinary morning could turn into a fight for survival. Fear mingled with determination, and he pressed on, refusing to let panic cloud his judgment. "Stay with me," he said, kneeling beside her again as they waited. He checked her pulse, kept her talking, and reassured her repeatedly that help was on the way. She gripped his hand tightly, her eyes never leaving his. The rancher knew that keeping her calm was just as important as any physical action he could take. Fear, after all, could make the body react unpredictably, sometimes as dangerously as the venom itself. Minutes felt like hours. The swelling in her ankle continued, and her leg began to show signs of discoloration. The rancher's heart raced. He had treated small bites before, but this seemed faster, stronger, more dangerous. He felt a cold knot of worry in his stomach. For a moment he wondered if he had done the right thing by attempting the old remedy, but he pushed the thought aside. Right now, every second counted. He had to keep her alive until help arrived. Finally, he heard the distant sound of sirens. Relief and renewed urgency collided in him. He helped his niece into the truck, adjusting her carefully on the seat so that she wouldn't move her leg unnecessarily. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue from fear and pain. "You're doing great," he said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're almost there. Just hold on." Driving over the rough dirt roads, the rancher focused entirely on the path ahead. Every bump and rut caused the girl to flinch, and he adjusted his speed to balance urgency with caution. The landscape blurred past them, golden fields, clusters of trees, and the occasional cattle grazing quietly, oblivious to the emergency unfolding nearby. He kept talking, telling her stories of the ranch, the animals, and even a few harmless jokes to coax a small smile from her pale face. Each smile, no matter how fleeting, strengthened his resolve. As the truck rattled forward, the rancher felt a growing awareness of just how serious the situation was. The swelling had reached her calf, and her breathing was rapid and shallow. He knew the venom could affect her heart, her muscles, even her breathing if it continued unchecked. He checked her pulse again, noting its weakness, and adjusted her position slightly to keep her comfortable. He reminded her to take slow, steady breaths, showing her how to calm herself even in the midst of fear. At one point, she whimpered softly. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The rancher stopped the truck for a moment, knelt beside her, and took her hand in both of his. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human, but you're strong and we're going to get through this together. I promise." Those words seemed to anchor her. She nodded slightly, wiping at her tears, and tried to breathe more steadily. The rancher allowed himself a moment of quiet relief, but he didn't let his guard down. He kept his eyes on the road and on her condition, constantly assessing and adjusting. Halfway to the hospital, the truck hit a particularly rough patch of road, and she gasped sharply as pain shot through her leg. The rancher's stomach tightened. He reminded her to focus on his voice, telling her to squeeze his hand if she felt overwhelmed. The simple act of connecting, of sharing the burden of fear, seemed to make a difference. Though the venom was still dangerous, the human bond, the trust between them, became a lifeline, giving her the courage to endure and giving him the determination to keep driving forward. As the miles passed, the rancher's thoughts wandered briefly to what might happen next. Would the doctors be able to stop the venom in time? Would she have lasting effects? He had no answers, only hope and action. He replayed in his mind the small first aid steps he had taken before the truck ride, hoping that his quick decisions had bought them precious minutes. Every nerve in his body was tense, every sense alert. Finally, the hospital came into view, a small building against the horizon, yet to the rancher, it felt like a beacon of hope. He parked the truck and ran inside, carrying her carefully into the emergency room. Doctors and nurses immediately took over, guiding her to a treatment area, checking her vitals, and administering initial care. The rancher stepped back for the first time in hours, allowing professionals to take charge, but he stayed close, watching every movement, listening to every word, and offering comfort with his presence. The niece clutched his hand one last time, exhausted but alive. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw a mixture of fear, relief, and gratitude. They had made it through the first critical phase, but he knew the fight was not over. There would be treatment, monitoring, and recovery, but at least they had reached this stage together. Sitting in the quiet hospital corridor, he allowed himself a moment to breathe deeply, the weight of adrenaline slowly lifting. The fear was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it had been joined by a sense of pride and relief. They had faced danger, and though the outcome was uncertain, they had taken the steps that could save her life. He realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. And in that long, tense day, amidst swelling pain, fear, and uncertainty, the bond between the rancher and his niece had deepened in a way that only life-threatening situations could create. They had both learned a lesson about trust, resilience, and the unpredictable nature of life on the ranch. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Bright lights glared overhead, and the distant hum of machines filled the room. The rancher stood near the treatment bed, watching the doctors and nurses move quickly around his niece. His hands were still clenched, and every muscle in his body felt tense. He had never felt so helpless in his life. All his years of experience on the ranch, all his knowledge of survival, could not prepare him for the sight of someone he loved so vulnerable and in pain. The niece lay on the hospital bed, her face pale and damp with sweat. The swelling in her leg had spread higher than the rancher had seen before, and the redness now reached almost to her knee. She winced as the nurse cleaned the bite, and the rancher felt a pang of guilt. He had tried to help her on the ranch, had followed the old advice she had begged him to use, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it might not have been enough. A doctor, a woman in her 40s with a calm but commanding presence, approached him. "He's stable for now," she said, referring to his niece's vitals. "But the venom is moving quickly. We need to start treatment immediately." The rancher nodded, swallowing hard. He had expected medical intervention to be fast, but hearing the word quickly repeated made his stomach tighten. Every second mattered, and he felt acutely aware of how close they had come to disaster. He stood beside her, holding her hand. "It's okay," he whispered, though he felt the fear rising in his own chest. She clung to him, her small fingers gripping his firmly. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, her voice shaking. "What if it doesn't work?" The rancher shook his head, trying to force courage into both himself and her. "It will work," he said firmly. "You're strong. We've gotten this far together and we're not giving up now. The doctors are going to help you and you're going to be okay." His words were steady, but inside he felt a cold realization settling over him. This wasn't like the usual emergencies on the ranch. This was a fight against something invisible, something that could strike unpredictably and without mercy. As the doctors prepared the antivenom, the rancher noticed something unusual. The swelling wasn't just in her leg. It seemed to be affecting her entire lower body. The color of her skin was changing slightly, a grayish tint that made his stomach knot. He felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the venom seemed different, stronger, more dangerous than the typical snake bites he had read about. His mind raced through possibilities. Was it a rare species, one more venomous than he realized? Could the remedy he had tried have made it worse? The niece looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Am I going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. The rancher forced a smile, though it felt tight and false. "Yes," he said, gripping her hand tighter. "You're going to be okay. We just need to get through this part first. That's all we can do right now." The doctors worked quickly, administering the antivenom and monitoring her vitals closely. Machines beeped, and nurses moved with practiced efficiency, but the rancher could not shake the cold dread creeping into him. He realized that despite all his experience, despite all his preparation, there were limits to what he could control. Nature had a power that could not always be predicted, and human life was fragile in ways he had only understood in theory until now. Minutes passed, each one stretching into an eternity. The rancher watched the swelling slowly begin to respond to treatment, though the discoloration and the rapid pulse of his niece reminded him that the danger was far from over. He kept talking to her, telling her about small memories from the ranch, stories of animals they had cared for together, even simple jokes that made her smile briefly despite the fear. Every laugh, every squeeze of her hand became a lifeline, a reminder that they were still fighting together. But then a sudden change made his blood run cold. The niece's breathing grew shallow and irregular, and her eyes fluttered as if struggling to stay open. The rancher's heart leapt into his throat. He had been focusing on her leg, on the swelling, on the anti-venom, and in that moment he realized that venom could affect more than just the immediate bite. He called out urgently to the doctor, who immediately rushed to her side, adjusting her oxygen and monitoring her vitals more closely. The rancher stepped back slightly, taking a deep breath. His mind was a storm of fear and calculation. He replayed every moment from the bite onward, thinking about the choices he had made, the remedy he had tried, the speed with which he had acted. Could any of that have made things worse? His chest tightened as he realized that in emergencies like this, every action had consequences, and even the best intentions could carry risks. He knelt beside her again, holding her hand and speaking softly. "I'm right here," he whispered. "You're not alone. Just focus on me, okay? Take slow breaths." She tried to follow his instructions, her eyes blinking rapidly as she fought to stay conscious. He could feel the tension in her small body, the trembling that came from both fear and the venom's effect. His own hands shook slightly, though he tried to keep them steady for her. The doctors worked methodically, adjusting dosages, monitoring responses, and giving the rancher updates. "We're doing everything we can," the lead doctor said. "Her body is responding, but it's a delicate situation. The venom is strong, and it's affecting her system in ways that require constant attention." The rancher nodded, swallowing hard. He knew that worry was inevitable, but he forced himself to remain present, to be the calm center in the storm of uncertainty. Time stretched, each moment a delicate balance between hope and fear. The niece's hand gripped his tightly, a silent plea for reassurance, and he gave it freely. "You're doing so well," he said softly. "Every second you hold on, we're getting closer to safety. You're braver than anyone I've ever known." Her lips curved in a weak smile, and he felt a tiny spark of relief. Even in the face of danger, human courage could shine. But the rancher could not ignore the growing fear gnawing at his mind. Something about this bite was different. He noticed subtle changes, small signs in her skin color, the rhythm of her heartbeat, even the way her breathing shifted slightly despite the oxygen support. His experience told him that venom was unpredictable, but this seemed unusually aggressive. He realized with a jolt that every second still mattered, that even in the hospital, the fight was far from over. He stayed by her side, refusing to leave, refusing to let fear paralyze him. He reminded her to focus on small things, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his hand, the knowledge that she was surrounded by people trained to save her life. He realized that courage was not about ignoring fear, but about acting in spite of it, about finding strength when everything inside urged you to panic. As the hours passed, her condition stabilized slightly. The swelling began to slow, and the color of her leg started to return to a more normal tone. The rancher allowed himself a cautious sigh, though he remained alert. He knew that recovery would be gradual, that the effects of venom could linger, and that this was just the first chapter of her survival. The niece, exhausted but conscious, looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The rancher smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "I would never give up on you," he said. "You're part of this family and we face everything together. You're stronger than you know." In the quiet moments that followed, as machines beeped steadily and the hospital staff continued their careful work, the rancher realized something important. Life could change in an instant, transforming ordinary mornings into battles for survival. But human courage, love, and trust could make even the scariest situations bearable. The bond between him and his niece had been tested in ways he had never imagined, and though fear had been present every step of the way, so had resilience. The day had started with laughter and light, with the simple joys of life on the ranch. Now it was filled with tension, uncertainty, and the raw intensity of facing danger head-on. And yet, in that intensity, there was a lesson that hope, courage, and human connection could carry people through moments that seemed impossible to survive. The rancher held her hand, his gaze fixed on her, and felt a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The venom had been strong, more dangerous than he had anticipated, but together they had navigated the first wave of crisis. The doctors worked with calm precision. The hospital provided the tools and knowledge they lacked in the field, and the niece, despite fear and pain, had shown remarkable strength. For the rancher, the cold shock he had felt when he first saw the unusual effects of the venom still lingered. He knew that the journey was not over, that treatment, monitoring, and recovery would take time. But he also knew that their bond had deepened in ways that would never be forgotten. They had faced a near-death experience together, and in doing so, they had discovered the depths of courage, love, and resilience within themselves. And in that hospital room, amidst the quiet beeping of machines and the soft murmur of medical staff, the rancher and his niece shared a moment of silent understanding. Life on the ranch had taught them many lessons, but this experience had taught them the most important one, that even in the face of the most dangerous and unexpected challenges, human courage and trust could make all the difference in surviving the storm. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and the occasional footsteps of nurses moving through the corridor. The rancher remained by his niece's side, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the rhythm of her shallow breaths. Though her condition had stabilized slightly, the swelling and pain in her leg were still a serious concern. The rancher knew that the real battle was far from over. Treatment had begun, but recovery would be slow, and complications could appear at any moment. He took her hand in his, holding it firmly, trying to provide comfort. Her small fingers twitched weakly against his, and he felt a pang of helplessness. She had been so brave, enduring the bite, the rough drive, and the initial pain of treatment, yet now her exhaustion and fear were catching up to her. He gently stroked her hair back from her forehead and spoke softly, "We're going to get through this, I promise. Just hold on a little longer." The niece's eyes fluttered open, her gaze searching his face. I didn't think I'd make it," she admitted, her voice barely audible. She swallowed hard, fighting both the pain and the fear that still gripped her. The rancher shook his head, forcing a small smile. "You're stronger than you think. You held on through everything so far. This is just another step and we'll get through it together." As the doctors continued their work, adjusting dosages and monitoring her response, the rancher noticed subtle changes in her condition. The swelling had begun to spread slightly higher on her leg again, and her skin was taking on a faint grayish hue in certain areas. His chest tightened. Even though the antivenom was working, her body was still reacting to the venom in unpredictable ways. The rancher realized the fight wasn't over and that vigilance was still necessary. He couldn't let his guard down, not for a moment. He leaned closer to her, speaking quietly to keep her focused on something other than the fear. "Remember the time you tried to herd the calves by yourself?" he asked, his tone light. "You were convinced you could do it alone, and you almost ended up chasing them into the creek. But you didn't give up and you figured it out in the end. This is just like that. You're going to get through this too." A small smile flickered across her lips, and the rancher felt a surge of hope. Even in the midst of danger, even while her body was reacting to venom, her courage was shining through. But the rancher also knew the stakes were high. He watched every twitch of her body, every shallow breath, aware that venom could affect her system in ways that were sudden and dangerous. His own fear pressed down on him, but he refused to let it show. She needed his strength more than ever. Hours passed, each moment a delicate balance of hope and worry. The rancher stayed vigilant, monitoring her pulse, her breathing, and the color of her skin. He encouraged her to stay awake, to speak, to focus on small things in the room, the pattern of the ceiling tiles, the soft hum of the machines, even the sunlight filtering through the blinds. Every distraction, every small moment of connection helped keep her grounded, kept her willpower strong. At one point, the niece whispered, "I can feel it moving." Her voice trembled with fear and the rancher's stomach tightened. "The swelling?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, it feels like it's spreading." He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "It's okay," he said firmly. "You're in good hands. The doctors are treating it, and you're doing everything right by staying calm. Focus on your breathing just like we practiced. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale." She followed his instructions, her small chest rising and falling as she tried to regulate her breath. The rancher continued speaking, recounting memories from the ranch. The first time she had ridden a horse alone, the time she had helped save a calf that had gotten stuck in the mud, even the simple mornings of feeding the chickens together. Each story was a lifeline, something familiar and comforting to anchor her in the storm of fear and pain. Despite the gradual improvement, the rancher noticed something troubling. The niece's lips had taken on a slightly bluish tint, and she shivered, even under the warm blankets provided by the hospital staff. Her pulse was uneven at times, though the monitors showed it remaining within safe limits. The rancher's heart pounded with worry. He realized that the venom's effects could be delayed, unpredictable, and dangerous. It was a reminder of how fragile human life could be and how quickly circumstances could change. He spoke to her softly, trying to offer reassurance without diminishing the seriousness of the situation. "I know it's scary," he said, "but look at how far you've come. You've survived the bite, the drive, the initial treatment. You've shown courage every step of the way. That courage is still here, and it's going to carry you through this." The niece blinked, tears forming in her eyes, not from pain, but from the emotional intensity of the moment. She squeezed his hand weakly, a silent acknowledgement of trust and gratitude. The rancher felt a lump in his throat. He realized that beyond the physical danger, there was an emotional and psychological battle being fought as well, a battle against fear, panic, and the helplessness that often accompanies critical emergencies. Time continued to pass slowly. The rancher remained by her side, alternating between checking her vitals and keeping her engaged in conversation. He encouraged her to focus on small, positive things, reminding her of the simple joys of life on the ranch, the sound of the river running in the morning, the smell of fresh hay, even the sight of their favorite horses grazing quietly in the fields. Every small image, every memory, was a tool to help her keep her mind steady, to fight the rising fear and pain. The hospital staff continued to monitor her closely, adjusting the treatment as needed. They administered fluids, checked her blood, and ensured that the antivenom was working effectively. The rancher observed every action, asking questions, learning quickly, and helping translate the technical instructions into words that his niece could understand. He remained calm, even when a nurse asked him to move back for a procedure, offering comfort from a short distance and returning immediately to her side afterward. Hours turned into a long afternoon. The niece's swelling slowly began to stabilize, though her leg was still painful and tender. The rancher felt a cautious sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that complications could arise at any moment. He kept speaking to her, keeping her focused and keeping her courage alive. She was exhausted, but the determination in her eyes reminded him why he had stayed calm and acted decisively on the ranch. As evening approached, the niece's condition improved slightly. Her breathing was steadier, her pulse more regular, and her skin color returning closer to normal. The rancher allowed himself a small sigh, though he remained vigilant. The danger had passed, but recovery would be gradual, and the lessons of the day were not yet fully realized. He reflected on the fragility of life, the unpredictability of nature, and the deep human capacity for courage and resilience. He knelt beside her one last time as the evening light filtered through the hospital blinds. "You did it," he whispered softly. "You held on through everything. You're going to be okay now, I promise." She smiled weakly, tears glimmering in her eyes, and reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently, feeling the warmth of her trust and the strength of her spirit. The rancher realized that this experience had changed both of them. For his niece, it had been a lesson in courage, trust, and the power of human connection. For him, it had been a reminder of how quickly life could shift from ordinary to life-threatening, and how important it was to act decisively and with care. They had faced a near-death experience together, and in doing so, they had strengthened a bond that would last a lifetime. As the night settled over the hospital, the rancher remained at her side, keeping watch. He knew that full recovery would take time, but for now, the immediate danger had passed. The swelling was under control, her vitals were stable, and she was awake and responsive. The rancher allowed himself a quiet moment to breathe, grateful that they had made it through the most critical phase. In that quiet hospital room, he reflected on the events of the day, from the morning on the ranch, through the bite, the frantic drive, and the tense hours of treatment. Each moment had been filled with fear, uncertainty, and urgency. Yet each moment had also revealed courage, resilience, and the deep bonds of family and trust. They had faced danger together, and together they had survived. The rancher knew that this day would be remembered for the rest of their lives, not just for the fear and pain, but for the strength, love, and courage that had carried them through. And as he held her hand gently in the fading evening light, he understood that the true measure of survival was not just in the body, but in the spirit. The courage to face the unknown, the determination to act in the face of fear, and the trust that binds people together in the hardest of times. The hospital room was quiet now, the urgent rush of earlier hours replaced by a calm, steady rhythm. The machine still beeped softly, but there was no longer the tension of panic. The niece lay in her hospital bed, her face pale but calm, eyes fluttering open occasionally to look around. She had slept more in the past few hours than she had in days, and the rancher watched her with a mix of relief and lingering worry. Every inch of the swelling in her leg had started to reduce, and the color of her skin had returned closer to normal. It was a sign that her body had begun to heal, responding to the treatment and the care that had been provided since the venomous bite. The rancher sat beside her, his hand holding hers gently. He had not left her side since they arrived at the hospital. Even as he allowed himself a few moments of quiet, he remained alert, aware that recovery was still ongoing and that she needed him now, more than ever, as a source of strength and reassurance. He brushed a few stray hairs from her forehead, and she smiled weakly at him, the faintest sign of gratitude and comfort in her eyes. "You look better," he said softly, trying to lighten the mood. "That swelling is going down, and the doctors say you're doing really well." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I feel tired," she admitted, her voice soft, "but I'm glad you were here. I don't know what I would have done without you." The rancher smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "You wouldn't have had to do anything alone," he said. "That's why I was here. We face things together always. You've been so brave. You held on when it mattered most." The hours passed slowly, the hospital now a place of quiet observation rather than emergency. Nurses checked her vitals regularly, adjusting medications and monitoring her progress. The rancher remained close, offering comfort and reassurance, speaking softly to keep her calm and awake. He reminded her of the little things from their life on the ranch, memories meant to make her smile and feel grounded. He described the sunrise over the pastures, the way the cows had grazed lazily that morning, even the funny story of the calf that had escaped the pen last summer. Every word was meant to keep her mind away from fear and pain, to give her courage during recovery. As evening approached, her strength returned gradually. She could sit up more easily, and the rancher helped her adjust the pillows behind her back. The swelling had reduced significantly, though her ankle and calf were still tender. "How's your leg feeling?" he asked gently. Better, a lot better, she replied. It's still sore, but I think it's healing. The rancher nodded. That's good. You've been through a lot today, but you're healing well. Soon we'll be able to go home, back to the ranch, and everything will be okay again. Despite the calm, both of them knew the experience had left a mark. Fear, adrenaline, and near tragedy had shaped the day, but they had faced it together. The rancher thought back to the moment on the pasture, the snake's sudden strike, and the desperate plea that had changed everything. He realized how quickly life could turn from ordinary to dangerous, how fragile human life truly was, and how courage and decisiveness could make the difference between survival and tragedy. I still can't believe it, the niece said quietly. One moment we were laughing, picking flowers, and the next I was in so much pain, I thought I was done for. The rancher squeezed her hand. That's how life is sometimes, he said softly. It can change in an instant. But what matters is how we face it, and you faced it bravely. You didn't give up, and that's why you're here. The niece's eyes shimmered with tears, not of pain but of relief. I guess I learned something today, she said, her voice trembling. That life can be scary, but also that I'm stronger than I thought, and that I can count on people who care about me. The rancher nodded. Exactly, he said, and never forget that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about keeping going even when you are. That's what you did today. The hours continued, filled with quiet conversations, occasional laughter, and moments of reflection. The hospital staff moved efficiently, checking her progress and giving instructions for follow-up care. The rancher listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions so he could help her manage recovery at home. He wanted to make sure she would be safe once they left, that the lessons from this ordeal would help them both avoid danger in the future. As night fell, the hospital quieted even more. Outside the window, the lights of the distant town twinkled faintly, a reminder of the world beyond the ranch and the hospital. The niece lay back against the pillows, exhausted but at peace for the first time since the morning's terrifying events. The rancher continued to hold her hand, feeling the weight of relief, gratitude, and lingering concern all at once. He reflected on the day, the fear, the rush to the hospital, the uncertainty, and the courage both of them had shown. Every decision had mattered, from attempting the old remedy in the field to keeping her calm during the drive, to staying by her side while the doctors worked. And now, with the immediate danger behind them, he could see the strength and resilience that fear and danger had revealed in both of them. You know, he said gently, breaking the quiet, I think we've learned something important today. About life, about courage, and about each other. The niece smiled weakly, nodding. Yeah, I guess we have, and I'm really glad you were there. The rancher chuckled softly, a sound full of relief and warmth. Me too. There's no one I'd rather face a day like this with than you. The rest of the night was quiet. The niece rested, her breathing even, her body slowly recovering, while the rancher stayed nearby, alert but finally able to allow himself a sense of calm. He thought about the ranch, the fields, the life they would return to once she was fully healed. Everything had seemed ordinary that morning, and yet that ordinary day had turned into a test of courage, resilience, and the bond between them. By morning she was awake again, smiling faintly. The swelling had decreased further, and the doctors were confident that with continued care, she would make a full recovery. The rancher helped her sit up, offering support as she swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her strength was returning slowly but surely, and he felt a profound sense of relief. You're really getting better, he said. Soon, we'll be back at the ranch and things will feel normal again. She nodded. I can't wait, but I'll never forget what happened. I'll remember how scary it was and how brave you helped me be. The rancher smiled, a mixture of pride and humility in his expression. That's the thing about life, he said. We can't control everything. Danger can come when we least expect it. But we can control how we face it and who we trust to help us through. Today, you faced danger and we faced it together. That's what matters." As they prepared to leave the hospital, the rancher helped her into the car. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, reflective, filled with soft conversation and moments of shared relief. The landscape passed by, the golden fields, the tall grasses, and the familiar sights of the ranch that had seemed ordinary but now felt more precious than ever. Every tree, every path, every hill reminded them of life's fragility and the importance of courage, care, and trust. Arriving at the ranch, the niece stepped out slowly, careful with her recovering leg. She looked around, the familiar sights grounding her, filling her with a sense of safety and peace. The rancher watched her, pride swelling in his chest. They had survived an ordeal that could have ended in tragedy, and yet here they were, alive together and stronger for it. In the days that followed, she recovered fully. The swelling went down completely, and her strength returned. The rancher continued to watch over her, guiding her, teaching her, and sharing small moments of life on the ranch that reminded them both of the calm beauty that had existed before the morning of terror. But now that calm was paired with a deep awareness of life's fragility and the power of courage and love. The experience left a lasting impression on both of them. For the niece, it was a lesson in bravery, resilience, and trust. For the rancher, it was a reminder that life's challenges can come suddenly, and that love, courage, and decisiveness can make all the difference. They had faced danger together, survived, and emerged with a bond stronger than ever. A bond forged in fear, strengthened by trust, and validated through resilience. And as the sun set over the ranch once more, casting golden light across the fields, they both knew that while life could be unpredictable and sometimes terrifying, it was also full of moments worth cherishing, moments that revealed courage, compassion, and the strength of human connection. That day, which began like any other, had transformed them forever, leaving lessons they would carry for the rest of their lives.